Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Mark Borstein. I'm the CTO at Tremolo Security, co-author of Kubernetes, an Enterprise Guide, second edition. And this chapter is actually covering one of my favorite subjects, the Kubernetes dashboard. Um, it is one of my favorite subjects for a few reasons. One, there's so much FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt out there about the dashboard. There are a lot of folks who will say, oh, it is insecure. They'll point to breaches like what happened at Tesla. You can deploy it insecurely. And we are going to deploy it insecurely just to see why, how you could deploy it insecurely. But the great thing about the dashboard to remember is one, it's incredibly convenient. You get it set up properly, and now you have access to your cluster quickly from a web browser. So this frees you up from maybe you're running an iPad or some other kind of mobile device, and you're not sitting at a laptop, and you need to have quick access to your cluster for something. Kubernetes dashboard does a great job for that. Um, and So that's one. Two, there are other dashboards that you're going to probably end up deploying throughout your cluster. Once we get to chapter 12 and 13, we start talking about Istio. We're going to deploy Kiali. Kiali needs to interact with the API server on your behalf, just the same way the dashboard does. We start talking about Tecton in chapter 14. We deploy the dashboard. It's another dashboard that's going to have to interact with the API server on your behalf. And the key when you deploy these dashboards is to not give the dashboards any more permissions than they absolutely need. And in order to do that, you want the dashboard to actually act on your behalf. And so out of the box, the Kubernetes dashboard actually has no permissions. It can scrape some metrics, but that's about it. So if somebody were to get a hold of the service account that the dashboard has, they can't really do anything with it. Or at least they can't do a whole heck of a lot. Whereas once we start talking about once we start talking about some of the insecure ways to deploy a dashboard where you're giving it all sorts of permissions, that's where you really run into problems. And so we've been using the dashboard here for a few chapters. That's because OpenUnison integrates it securely out of the box. We're going to take a look at that security. We're going to break it so that it doesn't work properly. And you can see how that kind of comes together. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about local dashboards, things like Octane. So let's go ahead and get started. I am on page 239. And step one, deploy the dashboard. We already have that. Step two is let's go ahead and start a bypass for authentication. So if we go ahead, let's see, do I still have it here? I do. So I'm going to go ahead and port forward directly to the dashboard. So I'm going to bypass OpenUnison. Actually, do 8443, and you'll see that the first thing that happens is I got to tell it that it's HTTPS. So first thing the dashboard does is it's going to ask you for a token. This has been the default for quite some time. We are going to get around this because we're going to say, you know what, we're not going to bother with authentication. We're going to do this the insecure way. So let's go ahead and I'm on step two. Kube control, edit deployment, Kubernetes dashboard, and Kubernetes dashboard. And so I am looking for the arguments, and we're going to add enable skip login. Let's go ahead and control get pods and Kubernetes dashboard. So we're already back up and running. It's been running for 10 seconds. So now, oops, nope, I don't want to edit that again. port forward. So now let's go ahead and access our dashboard again. And it's still asking me to log in with the token. Let's make sure I did this correctly. Edit deployment. Enable, skip, login. All right. Interesting. Okay, well, I thought that was going to let it skip the login. Apparently not. So let's go ahead and go to step 4, and maybe this will get it working. So v temp ingress.yaml, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy this right out of here. And of course, that didn't come along, so let's go ahead and fix all the indenting. All right. It's back in. Path type. All right, let's go ahead and update our. Shoot. The wrong key. All right, so let's try this again. 104. And then K create F temp ingress. All right, so that's been created. And let's see what happens. Aha, that's why it worked. Okay. So let's go ahead and didn't read all the instructions. Which is weird because I wrote the instructions. All right, so we're going to go directly to our dashboard. Oh yeah, there was a skip button. That's why. Okay. So now I'm going directly via an ingress. So I'm bypassing Open Unison. Let's go ahead and skip. And now I'm directly in the dashboard. But we got all these errors because the dashboard account has no permissions. So let's go ahead and do the next terrible thing. And let's see, we just did 8. So now let's go ahead and assign our dashboard permissions to do things it really shouldn't be able to do. So vtemp rbac.yaml. So if you remember from chapter 7, or chapter 6, I guess this is chapter 7, where we did RBAC. So what we are doing now is we're creating a RBAC cluster role binding. To go ahead and make our dashboard cluster admin, which really do not do this at home. This is really the don't do these things chapter. Temp RBAC. So I did that. So let's go ahead and check our, uh, and you'll see we don't have any errors here anymore. And if we go over to our nodes, there we go. So we have successfully done something that we should absolutely never do, which is expose our dashboard via ingress without authentication and with a service account. We had to go through a lot of work to make that happen, right? Um, we had to disable the login process. We had to skip verify, or we had to create an ingress rule. We had to add we had to add an RBAC binding. Now you'll see a lot of guides for the dashboard that'll say, just go ahead and upload your token or upload your kube config. And in fact, um, go to sign in, you can see here you could paste your token. So in theory, what you could do is um, you could just put your ID token in there. But here's the problem with that. Our ID tokens are only good for a minute. We're following good hygiene when it comes to our bearer tokens. They're short-lived. In order for this to work, you have to have a long-lived token. So even when you're following those guides, that's a bad idea. The right way to do it is the way OpenUnison does it, where you set up a reverse proxy. And that reverse proxy injects the identity into every request. That's how we're doing it with the Kate's dashboard. That's how we're doing it with um, Tecton. When we get there, that's also how we're doing it with Kiali, and that's how you should do it with your dashboards. So we've finished step 10. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about why it's so important to add authentication to your dashboard. Um, one of the things that people say is, oh, well, it's a secret URL, you won't know what it is, or I'll do port forward and nobody's going to find it. Well, here's the thing. One, if somebody gets into your cluster and they get into that namespace, they get a handle on that service account that we just gave full access to, you're done. You've now given up a token that can be used by anyone. So that's one. Two, you got to be careful of what you're running on your own system. Um, folks are always looking for a way to get things more secure. And in this one, we're going to show what happens when you run some software that you maybe shouldn't. So let's go ahead and go to our Git local Kubernetes Enterprise Guide second edition, and we're going to go into chapter 7. Yep. And so I'm looking on Reddit and I find this great little script that's going to secure my dashboard, right? So let's do go run kube control secure my dashboard .go, and we'll do HTTPS Kate secret dashboard.apps.192.168.2.104.nip.io. So what we're going to do here is we are going to lock down our dashboard um, and show how the dashboard's built-in API, because dashboard is just a single-page application. When you're working with it, it's just calling APIs. So like if I come here and I go to more tools, web developer tools, network, and let's just go check out cron jobs, right? So this is all just API requests. Well, guess what? You could write a script that calls these API requests, right? And if that script has no authentication built in, or if there's no authentication built into your dashboard, oh, cool, our dashboard is now secured. So let's see what it did. And let's go, oh, shoot, I got a Bitcoin miner on my pod now. That's bad. Um, and so, had the dashboard been set up with authentication, this wouldn't have worked. And just to prove it, let's go ahead and delete this not a Bitcoin miner, because you don't want Bitcoin miners running on your system. Why didn't it delete? There we go. Okay, so now we're going to do it against the actual dashboard that requires authentication. KeatsDB. So this is the dashboard that requires you to be authenticated. Yeah, didn't work because we had authentication on there. That script wasn't going to work. And if we go and we look at our deployments, we'll see that we don't have any Bitcoin miners in there. So that's why it's so important to add authentication to your dashboards. Do it the right way. You'll see that we also have authorization built in because we're passing through. It's the same thing as kube control. The way that your cluster is right now set up, or at least it was when it was set up with just Open Unison, the dashboard is every bit as secure as kube control. You add multi-factor authentication, and you're in good shape there from a security standpoint. So that's really all the labs, I think, in this one. We talk a little bit about the architecture of the dashboard, why you want to use a reverse proxy. The reverse proxy is going to do the authentication for you. Let the reverse proxy do session management. Dashboard doesn't do a great job of session management, and that on its own. And then, it's doing the identity injection. And the last section of this chapter is a short chapter. Covers local dashboards, such as, Visual Studio Code has a built-in dashboard, which I'm a big fan of. It's simple. Gets a lot of the stuff done when I'm working with it. Octant is another great dashboard that I really enjoy. The trick with the local dashboards are, one, they tend to open up a lot of requests to the API server to be really responsive. Two, if you've got a poorly locked down API server, you're not actually gaining any security by using a local dashboard. So if you're doing all the anti-patterns we talked about in Chapter 5, like, say, authenticating with certificates or with long-lived tokens, well, guess what? Your local dashboard is going to be every bit as insecure as your remote dashboard. So, you deploy your dashboards the right way. Make sure they're acting on behalf of the user. They have limited RBAC. And you'll be in pretty good shape. So like I said, this is a big chapter, a small chapter, big subject, big topic, lots of FUD out there around the security of the dashboard. Next week, we're going to start diving into OPA and Gatekeeper, OPA. So we'll be talking about Rego and setting up policies and whatnot. So that'll be another one of my favorite subjects. So thank you very much for joining us. If you have a moment, please go to the Open Unison GitHub repo, give it a quick star. We're trying to get that onto the cloud native landscape. And great. Thanks for coming by. Have a great day.